When it's finally your turn, the universe will show you this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt like life was standing still? Like nothing was moving forward, no matter how much you tried? What if that stillness was not a punishment, but a preparation? In today's video, we'll explore how the universe works in silence, often hiding your breakthrough in plain sight until your spirit is truly ready. This is not about luck. It's about alignment, timing, and inner transformation. Comment below. I trust divine timing if you've ever felt like the waiting was shaping you. And if this resonates, share your story, and your experience could be the sign someone else has been praying for. Let's begin. 1. Waiting is not wasted time. It is sacred preparation. The silence you are experiencing is not a void. It is a sacred space where something ancient is being prepared within you. This is not wasted time. It is holy ground where your soul is being fortified in ways the world cannot see. Carl Jung reminds us that the unconscious is always at work, quietly aligning your outer reality with your inner transformation. Even when nothing seems to be happening, everything is happening beneath the surface. Like a seed buried deep within the soil, you are not lost. You are hidden, protected, and growing in a place where your roots can take hold before the world ever sees your bloom. You are being refined in silence, tested in stillness, shaped by invisible hands that are carving you into someone who will not only survive the next chapter, but embody it fully. And just because the world isn't clapping yet doesn't mean you're not becoming. Spiritual awakening doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives in the quiet reshaping of your perception, in the subtle shifts of your emotional landscape, in the way your soul begins to crave depth over distraction and alignment over applause. When nothing external seems to change, that's when your inner world is being rewritten with the codes of a new destiny. The delays you resent are often divine redirections, life's way of saying, not this door, not this path, not yet. This season is sacred because it is removing the noise, silencing the rush, and training you to trust what you cannot yet see. This is not punishment. It's preparation for a moment so defining that you will one day look back and thank the stillness that once frustrated you, because without it, you wouldn't have become who you needed to be to carry what's coming. In a world that glorifies urgency, the spiritual path invites us to honor divine timing, to listen for the wisdom within the wait. Every unanswered prayer is a portal. Every delay, a sacred mirror. Every pause, a chance to look inward and ask, what part of me is still catching up to the future I've asked for? You are not being denied. You are being held in divine incubation. And when it is finally your turn, you will rise not as someone who stumbled into destiny, but as someone who was consciously sculpted by the very hand of time. So do not curse the cocoon. Do not fight the pause. Do not run from the silence. This moment is making you, quietly, beautifully, powerfully, from the inside out. Have you ever felt like the waiting season is testing your faith? If you're ready to honor this sacred preparation, comment below. I will meditate to show you're embracing the wisdom in the waiting. 2. Timing is not random. It is divine precision. Timing is never random. It is the most sacred form of intelligence that life uses to shape you. In spirituality, There is a divine order behind what appears to be delay, silence, or stagnation. The reason things haven't happened yet is not because you're unworthy or overlooked, but because your inner state must evolve before the outer world responds. Life is not punishing you. It is preparing you. When your inner readiness meets outer reality, alignment occurs. Until then, every moment of stillness is doing more work on your soul than any chaotic progress ever could. If you received everything you prayed for too early, it would overwhelm you, not empower you. That dream would feel like a burden instead of a blessing. That relationship would expose your wounds instead of healing them. That success would feed your ego instead of fulfilling your purpose. Divine timing isn't just about patience, it's about protection. It shields you from becoming the wrong version of yourself in the right moment. Because in the realm of spiritual development, who you are becoming matters far more than what you are receiving. There is a sacred intelligence that lives in the unseen. When you are asked to wait, it is not a delay, it is a deep spiritual surgery. It is life holding you still long enough to recalibrate your frequency so you don't attract what you're not yet ready to carry. The universe will never give you something that will destroy your integrity, shake your identity, or weaken your purpose. That's why some seasons are quiet, some doors remain closed, and some prayers seem unanswered. Because beneath the silence, your spirit is being refined. Your inner world is being stretched, healed, and strengthened in places that would otherwise remain unexamined. And just like a tree grows roots before it ever breaks the surface, your growth is happening in hidden places. You may think nothing is happening, but in truth, everything is happening, but not where your eyes can see. The old version of you, the impatient one, the wounded one, the one attached to the outcome is dying. And in that sacred death, the aligned version of you is being born. Spirituality teaches us that rhythm matters more than speed. We are so conditioned to rush, to chase, to force things into existence that we forget power lies in divine alignment, not desperate action. When the time is right, nothing will stop the unfolding. You won't need to beg, hustle, prove, or manipulate. The door will open, not because you forced it, but because you became the one who was always meant to walk through it. The moment your energy, thoughts, values, and boundaries match the life you desire, you will begin to attract it effortlessly. That is the miracle of timing. It reveals who you truly are. It doesn't reward the impatient. It blesses the prepared. And preparation happens in the dark, in silence, in solitude, when no one is watching. That is where your foundation is laid. So if you're in a waiting season, breathe deeper. Let go of the timeline. Let go of the comparison. This is not a punishment. It's a pause for your power to catch up with your vision. The spiritual path is not linear. It flows like a river, curving, pausing, deepening before it moves again. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are in the hands of divine timing, being sculpted into the version of yourself who won't just receive the blessing, but carry it with grace. When it's finally your turn, you will not question it. You will know. Because every part of you will rise to meet that moment like it was always meant for you. That is not coincidence. That is spiritual precision. That is the beauty of becoming. Comment below. I trust divine timing. If you're ready to align with the perfect moment the universe has prepared for you. 3. The struggle is the sculptor of your soul. Every delay is not denial, but preparation. The universe is not ignoring you, it's sculpting you. Just like a master artist who sees the final masterpiece in a block of stone, the universe is removing every piece of you that doesn't belong to the life you're destined for. That job that didn't work out, that relationship that fell apart, that opportunity that slipped through your fingers, they were not failures. They were tools in the hands of the divine, chiseling away your doubt, your need for approval, your dependence on outcomes. Carl Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." And right now, every encounter, every silence, every disappointment is part of that meeting. What seems like rejection is actually spiritual refinement, and what feels like stillness is the most intelligent preparation your soul could ever undergo. You are not just waiting, you are becoming. Becoming the one who can handle the success without being crushed by it, who can receive love without losing herself in it, who can walk in purpose without needing validation from the crowd. That's the secret of spiritual wisdom. Your external life will always rise to meet the inner structure of your identity. If you've been wondering why it hasn't happened yet, why it's not your turn, ask yourself this: are you truly ready for what you say you want? Because the universe doesn't respond to your wishes. It responds to your frequency. It listens to who you are, not just what you ask for. When it's finally your turn, it won't be because you begged or forced. It'll be because you aligned. You'll have done the shadow work, healed the inner child, walked through the dark night of the soul, and emerged with clarity, integrity, and a rare kind of presence that doesn't chase, but attracts. That's the moment when what was once hidden becomes obvious, when the doors open, not by effort, but by energetic permission. The version of you that started the journey will no longer exist. You will have been shaped by fire, softened by waiting, sharpened by loneliness, and grounded by spiritual intelligence. And in that space, you no longer fear being overlooked, because you understand. When it's truly your turn, nothing can stop it, not even you. So honor this season of sacred delay. The silence you're experiencing isn't empty. It's full of movement beneath the surface. There is a deeper intelligence organizing everything for your highest good. Trust it. You are not late. You are right on time for a timeline you can't yet see. Spiritual awakening doesn't come with noise and drama. It comes with quiet inner shifts that rewrite your entire story from the inside out. This is the sculpting season. Let the universe chisel. Let your old self fall away. Because what is coming is not just a reward, it's a reflection of everything you've become. 4. Trust the invisible process. There is a process unfolding within you that no one sees, not even you. It is silent, sacred, and slow. In this hidden realm, the most important transformations take place not in the spotlight, but deep within the soil of your soul. Just because you cannot see the progress doesn't mean it isn't happening. In fact, the most intelligent form of spiritual growth often begins when everything around you seems motionless. This is where the real work begins, in the stillness. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. When life slows down, when everything feels paused, when the path forward is shrouded in fog, that is when your inner self is preparing for the life you're meant to step into. This is the essence of true spiritual awakening. It does not shout, it whispers. It does not demand visibility, it requires trust. You are not being punished, you are being protected, and perhaps more importantly, you are being positioned. Like a seed buried in darkness before it ever touches the light, your roots are expanding, gripping deeper truths, deeper clarity, deeper strength. The fruits you desire, success, love, alignment, and purpose, will never grow without those roots. And yet, the modern world teaches you the opposite. It pushes you to show results, to prove progress, to perform before you're ready. But real wisdom knows that power is not performance. The soul does not bloom on command. It blooms in divine timing, often when you least expect it, but most need it. Trust the seasons you don't understand. Trust the process that feels like nothing is happening, because that's where the sacred alignment occurs. Jung warned us that what we resist persists, and if you resist the stillness, you prolong the suffering. Instead, surrender. Trust that what's invisible is not inactive. Energy moves long before evidence arrives. Just as roots grow downward before trees rise upward, your evolution is descending into your depths before it can manifest in your life. The stillness is not the absence of progress. It is the container of preparation. The quieter your life becomes, the louder your inner world speaks. So listen. This is the language of spiritual intelligence. The knowing that does not need proof. The calm that does not require applause. The certainty that does not seek permission. And as you wait, understand, this is not passive. This is sacred work. You are shedding old selves, rewiring unconscious beliefs, and creating space for a reality more aligned with who you truly are. Let the silence rearrange you. Let the invisible shape your destiny. You are not behind. You are underground. And underground is where all miracles begin. You are not being overlooked. You are being refined. Every delay is a blessing disguised as stillness. Every quiet season is your soul preparing you for the kind of abundance you cannot yet imagine. If you feel unseen, it's because your transformation is sacred, not meant for casual observation. Carl Jung's wisdom echoes here. The most important changes are internal. The most powerful awakenings are personal. And the most intelligent growth is invisible. Until one day, you rise and the world finally sees what was blooming all along. Leave a like, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any powerful insights like this. Trust that the process is working for you. Type in the comments, "I deserve to live a financially prosperous life." 5. The test comes just before the breakthrough. When you are closest to your breakthrough, life has a way of testing you with such intensity that it feels like the very foundation of your soul is being shaken. Suddenly, doors that once seemed open begin to close. Support systems fade, your confidence wavers, and even your own thoughts begin to question everything you believed was coming. But this collapse is not a sign of failure. It is the sacred threshold between the version of you that has survived and the version of you that is ready to thrive. In the journey of spirituality and spiritual development, this is not punishment. It is the final purification. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's exactly what this moment demands. It requires you to face the parts of yourself that still doubt, that still carry fear, that still believe you are not worthy of the very thing you prayed for. Because the universe is not just concerned with giving you what you want. It is concerned with making sure you have the inner structure, emotional maturity, and energetic integrity to hold what you've asked for without losing yourself in the process. This final test is designed to call forward your courage, not your comfort. It does not come dressed as clarity. It comes dressed as chaos. It doesn't show up as a yes. It shows up as silence, as delay, as closed doors, as isolation, as questions that seem to have no answers. But beneath all of that confusion, a deeper rhythm is unfolding. This test is asking you, have you embodied the frequency of what you're asking for? If you've asked for a powerful love, can you love yourself unconditionally first? If you've asked for abundance, can you operate from generosity even when you feel lack? If you've asked for purpose, can you walk with meaning even when the path is dark? This is the moment when the external world withdraws so the internal world can rise. This is where spirituality shifts from wishful thinking to spiritual development, grounded in discipline, trust, and inner transformation. Many people retreat during this phase. They think the silence means it's not working. They think the delay is a denial. But in truth, the universe is watching to see if you can stay in alignment when nothing is affirming you externally. Can you still speak the language of your future when the present feels empty? Can you still walk with vision when you're surrounded by fog? Because that's the requirement of your next level. Not perfection, but persistence. The truth is, your breakthrough is not something you chase. It's something that finds you when your vibration becomes an undeniable match for it. The test is the final alignment. It removes what's weak, reveals what's true, and refines what's sacred in you. And when you pass this test, not only will the universe give you what you asked for, it will give you more, because you became more. This is the unspoken promise of spiritual development. What seems like the end is often the beginning, and what feels like rejection is often redirection to something even greater than you imagine. So if everything feels like it's falling apart, remember, it might just be falling into place. Hold your ground. Your breakthrough is closer than it appears. 6. When it's your turn, it will flow. When it's finally your turn, nothing will feel forced. The universe won't shout. It will whisper through alignment. Opportunities, people, and signs will converge with an effortless grace, not because you chased them, but because you evolved into someone who no longer needs to. The energy of striving will be replaced by a quiet confidence, a spiritual wisdom rooted in trust. You'll stop knocking on doors that lead nowhere, and instead, you'll be led gently but surely to the spaces that were carved just for you. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." And in those moments of stillness, of sacred waiting, you did just that. You learned to look inward instead of outward, to sit in the space between who you were and who you were becoming. What once seemed like a delay was actually divine intelligence orchestrating your transformation behind the scenes. You will begin to notice that the things that once confused you now make perfect sense. What once felt like a wall now feels like a window. The patterns you were stuck in begin to reveal their meaning. The pain you endured begins to look like preparation. The silence that once felt empty now feels full of answers. You realize that the universe wasn't making you wait. It was allowing you time to recalibrate, to become the version of yourself that no longer begs, chases, or doubts. And when the moment finally arrives, it won't feel like a climax. It will feel like peace. You will not be the same person who once begged for the outcome, because by then, you will have become someone who understands that outcomes are a reflection of alignment, not effort. The more you surrender, the more you receive. The more you trust, the more you attract. You begin to live with the kind of spiritual intelligence that doesn't question the unseen, but reveres it. You'll start to see that flowing with life is far more powerful than controlling it. You no longer try to impress or convince others because you've developed something rare presence. The presence that comes from walking through your shadows, healing your wounds, and facing your own mirror. The presence that says, I am already enough. Carl Jung taught us that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off parts of ourselves, but by embracing them. So you stop pretending, you stop hiding, you integrate, you embody, and suddenly the world responds to you differently, not because it changed, but because you did. The frequency you emit is no longer rooted in need, but in knowing, no longer in desperation, but in dignity. And that shift, though invisible to the eye, is magnetic to the universe. That's when things flow. That's when divine timing reveals itself. That's when you step into your moment, not because you forced it, but because you remembered who you are. 7. Courage is the bridge from waiting to living. You may never feel perfectly ready, but life doesn't wait for perfection. It waits for decision. There will be no grand announcement, no perfect alignment of signs. Instead, there will be a quiet moment when your soul whispers, "It's time." And in that moment, courage becomes the bridge from waiting to living. You don't need more preparation. What you need is to trust the preparation you've already endured. The nights you spent questioning your worth, the moments you held on when everything inside you wanted to give up, those weren't delays. They were sacred initiations. They were carving depth into your character, strengthening your emotional core, sharpening your spiritual intelligence, and refining your discernment. All of it was the silent architecture of becoming. Carl Jung once said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. And now that awakening is asking for embodiment. This is not the season of more analysis. It's the season of action, rooted in inner clarity. Because the truth is, life will not force you to become who you're meant to be. You must choose it, even when your knees shake. Faith is no longer an idea you talk about. Faith must become your movement. The door you've been praying for is already open, but it won't pull you in. It requires your feet. It requires a conscious crossing of your own thresholds made of fear, of self-doubt, of stories you inherited that told you to play small. Spiritual awakening is not a destination. It is the quiet courage to walk through that threshold without external permission. You will be tempted to wait for a sign, for a surge of confidence, for someone to tell you you're ready. But nothing will change until you do. Your life cannot expand if you keep clinging to the comfort of contemplation. You must act before it makes sense. You must move before it feels perfect. Because the version of you who will thrive in the next chapter does not exist in this one. That version of you is on the other side of the door you've been circling. And the password to access her, it's one word: decide. Every spiritual journey eventually demands this sacred leap. You do not become powerful by staying hidden in preparation. You become powerful when you choose to rise, again and again, even if no one claps, even if you fail, even if you're afraid. True strength is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear dictate your timing. In a world obsessed with external metrics, spiritual wisdom reminds you that the most important alignment is internal. When your soul says, "Go," the details will follow. When you trust the timing of your own inner unfolding, you tap into a divine rhythm that no human plan could ever orchestrate. What you thought was waiting was actually weaving. And now that the weaving is done, the only question is, will you walk through? Not because it's easy, but because you're finally willing to stop betraying the version of yourself that's been calling from the future. 8. Your turn will come, but will you be ready? Don't confuse waiting with punishment or silence with rejection, because in the realm of spirituality, delay is often divine design. What's meant for you will never pass you by, but it will also never come prematurely. The universe doesn't operate on your impatience. It responds to your alignment. The reason you haven't yet received what you deeply desire might not be because you're unworthy, but because you're still becoming. You're not being ignored, you're being prepared. In every silent moment, in every unanswered prayer, in every door that hasn't opened yet, there is an invisible process shaping your spirit, refining your perception, and strengthening your identity so that when your turn finally arrives, you're not overwhelmed by the blessing you're equal to it. And that's the essence of spiritual development. Becoming the person who can not only hold what's meant for them, but also honor it, expand it, and elevate through it. Carl Jung reminds us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Which means your becoming is not just about waiting, it's about awakening. Every experience you're having right now, whether frustrating, quiet, lonely, or slow, is a coded message from the universe telling you, you are in training. Training to recognize the opportunity when it knocks. Training to walk through the door without shrinking. Training to show up for the life you asked for with the inner authority to actually live it. If the opportunity arrived too soon, you might overlook it, sabotage it, or doubt you deserve it. But when you grow into readiness, the very same door you once longed for becomes the one you naturally walk through, not because it was forced open, but because you rose to meet it. Spirituality teaches us that the journey is never separate from the destination. How you wait determines how you receive. This is why discipline, reflection, solitude, and healing matter, because they build the internal structure necessary to support the external blessing. What you're going through now may be disguised as delay, but it is sacred formation. And when your season comes, you won't just receive the blessing, you will recognize it, because it matches the frequency of the person you've become. You'll see clearly that the delay wasn't denial, it was divine synchronization. you'll understand that the silence wasn't absence, it was sacred preparation. So continue to do the inner work, not because it guarantees a reward, but because it shapes you into someone who no longer doubts their own becoming. When your name is called and the moment arrives, you won't be surprised, you'll be ready. And that readiness will have been your greatest power all along. And remember, when it's finally your turn, the universe will not whisper, it will show you in unmistakable ways. Until then, trust the silence, honor the shadows, and keep preparing your soul for the life that's preparing for you. If this message resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss another moment of insight, growth, and spiritual awakening. Your journey is unfolding. Stay present. After surviving a narcissist's darkness, who does the empath become? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. If you've ever emerged from a toxic relationship wondering who you are now, you're not alone. This video is a mirror held up to the soul of every empath who has survived a narcissist's shadow. What comes after survival is not just healing, it's rebirth. It's time to stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "Who have I become because of it?" Comment below. I choose to rise beyond the pain if you're ready to reclaim your light. Let's dive deep into your transformation. You are not broken. You are becoming. 1. The empath's ordeal is not just survival. It's initiation. The empath does not merely walk away from narcissistic abuse. What they experience is a soul-level crucifixion, followed by a sacred resurrection. This is not just survival. It is spiritual alchemy. The empath absorbs what the narcissist cannot face in themselves: shame, guilt, rage, emptiness, and in doing so, becomes the unconscious vessel of another's darkness. But something begins to shift deep within the empath. What once felt like their responsibility slowly reveals itself as a borrowed wound. The pain they carried wasn't theirs, but their willingness to feel it became the furnace of transmutation. In the silence that follows the storm, the empath doesn't just find healing, they find vision. They do not return to who they were before the abuse. That self has been shattered. What emerges is a higher version forged in fire, one no longer seeking to please or to prove, but simply to be in alignment with truth. They no longer beg for peace, they embody it. They no longer try to rescue others, they reclaim themselves. This journey is the spiritual awakening Carl Jung alluded to when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The empath becomes conscious not just of the narcissist's behavior, but of their own patterns of people-pleasing disguised as kindness, emotional overfunctioning masked as love, silence mistaken for peace. The awakening is painful because it dismantles the illusions the empath once called identity. The roles they played as caretaker, fixer, healer burn away, and in the ashes, they finally meet their authentic self, the one who knows that boundaries are spiritual, that detachment is wisdom, that love does not require suffering to prove itself. This isn't bitterness, it's clarity. The empath becomes the watcher, the observer, the one who no longer needs to be needed to feel valuable. They are no longer triggered by manipulation because they've stopped negotiating with chaos. Their presence becomes magnetic, not because they are trying to be light for others, but because they have become light for themselves. This rebirth is quiet but powerful. It's not about revenge or righteousness. It's about no longer abandoning yourself. The empath understands now that surviving the narcissist was not the reward, it was the initiation. The gift is what comes after: discernment, depth, energy that no longer leaks, a nervous system that no longer shakes. They walk slower, speak less, feel more, and trust deeply in their own frequency. This is not healing, it is transformation. It is the spiritual mastery that comes from having been shattered and choosing to return as whole. They are no longer the mirror for the narcissist's delusion. They are the mirror for divine reflection. And in that stillness, that sovereignty, they become untouchable. Not because they resist pain, but because they have transmuted it. Not because they escape the world, but because they finally belong to themselves. This is not the end. It is the beginning of real power, born from spiritual awakening, refined through suffering, and grounded in unshakable truth. 2. Spiritual alchemy, from poison to power. After surviving the narcissist's darkness, the empath does not merely return to who they were. They undergo a profound metamorphosis, guided by the spiritual principle of individuation that Carl Jung so deeply explored. This is not just recovery. It is the sacred work of spiritual alchemy, where the empath becomes a conscious transformer of pain into power, of betrayal into wisdom, and of sorrow into sacred discernment. Once susceptible to manipulation due to their open heart, the empath now operates from a place of fierce clarity. They no longer confuse their sensitivity with helplessness, nor their compassion with obligation. They begin to notice the subtle shifts in energy, the unspoken motivations behind kind words, the hidden shadows lurking behind light-filled personas. No longer lost in the emotional noise of others, they start to hear their own soul's voice with unmistakable certainty. This voice, once buried beneath guilt and self-doubt, now speaks with quiet power, saying, "You are worthy, you are wise, and you are no longer available for relationships that dishonor your spirit." Spirituality for the awakened empath is no longer abstract. It is embodied. It lives in the boundaries they set with peace, in the truth they speak without apology, in the spaces they no longer enter just to make others comfortable. They begin to anchor themselves in spiritual development, recognizing that true compassion requires the ability to say no, that love without self-respect is a form of self-abandonment, and that forgiveness does not mean allowing repeated harm. They no longer view healing as becoming soft again, but as becoming whole, integrated, aware, and protected by their own wisdom. They walk into rooms and no longer shrink to fit. They radiate a calm, magnetic energy that makes others either rise to meet them or flee from their mirror. The empath becomes both sanctuary and storm, gentle with themselves, but no longer accessible to those who weaponize their kindness. And this shift isn't born from bitterness, it's born from illumination. They have stared into the abyss of manipulation and emotional control, and emerged with a clarity that cannot be unlearned. They know what gaslighting feels like in the body. They recognize the dissonance of words that don't match actions. They no longer wait for external validation to confirm what their intuition already told them in the first 5 seconds. This is the turning point. Their sensitivity is now shielded by sovereignty. They become attuned to the deeper language of energy, no longer explaining their instincts to those who live only on the surface. What once felt like a curse becomes their greatest compass. The lesson carved into their spirit is that survival was never the end goal. It was the doorway to spiritual embodiment. And now, they no longer just feel deeply, they see clearly. They trust slowly. They speak the truth. They protect peace. They have become a soul who not only survived darkness, but learned to transmute it into light. This is what spiritual growth looks like when forged in the fire of betrayal and sealed by the wisdom of self-love. 3. The narcissist is both outer and inner. The narcissist is not merely someone who hurt you. He is a symbol, an archetype, a walking embodiment of the collective shadow that Carl Jung so profoundly revealed. He is not just an external oppressor, but a reflection of the deeper psyche of ego run wild, of control dressed as charm, of love twisted into manipulation. But what most empaths don't realize is that the narcissist exists within as much as without. You, the empath, have been taught to give endlessly, to earn love by losing yourself, to be worthy only when you're saving someone else. And this internal addiction to sacrifice is the inner narcissist you must face. It is not loud. It does not abuse in the traditional sense, but it quietly tells you that you must be small to be loved, that suffering is spiritual, that silence is strength. And because of this, many empaths unconsciously participate in their own pain, entering relationship after relationship where they're not seen, only used. This is the unconscious dynamic Jung warned about when the unseen inner patterns rule your life and you call it destiny. But it's not destiny. It's programming. There comes a moment when you wake up not just from the narcissist's grip, but from your own internal prison. You begin to question why love always feels like loss, why empathy turns into exhaustion, why your open heart feels like an open wound. And in that moment, something ancient stirs inside you, a spiritual intelligence, a deeper wisdom that says, I no longer need to earn love through pain. You stop seeing yourself as the healer, the fixer, the one who must absorb darkness to be seen as light. And instead, you reclaim your boundaries, not as walls, but as gates of discernment. You realize that love is not sacrifice, it is presence. It is not about saving, it is about seeing. And from that place, your energy changes. You no longer attract takers. You no longer chase validation. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You become calm, solid, clear. And in that clarity, you discover a new power, the ability to sit with your own light without shrinking, and with your own shadow without shame. This is the rebirth of the empath. No longer a sponge for everyone's pain, but a mirror of spiritual clarity. No longer the martyr of every room, but the architect of emotional sovereignty. You learn that compassion is not about losing yourself. It's about finding yourself and still choosing to love. The narcissist no longer holds power because you've withdrawn the permission. You see through the illusion, the charm, the trauma bond. You understand the spell, and therefore you break it. And what remains is not bitterness, but wisdom. Not walls, but gates. Not fear, but discernment. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You are no longer imagining light. You are becoming integrated, embodied, awake. And that is the true transformation. Not surviving the narcissist, but surviving yourself. And finally, choosing to live. 4. From mirror to oracle, the new archetype. The empath who has survived the abyss of narcissistic entanglement no longer serves merely as a mirror reflecting back the wounds, projections, and needs of others. They evolve into an oracle. Someone who sees not only with the eyes of the soul, but with the intelligence carved from suffering, the spiritual wisdom born from fire. They become a living paradox, one who embodies both healing and revelation. Their presence alone becomes a catalyst. They don't need to speak to awaken others. Their energy does the speaking. The moment they enter a room, illusions begin to tremble, pretenses weaken, and hidden wounds begin to rise to the surface. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." The empath has done exactly that. After walking through years of internal warfare, emotional manipulation, and spiritual disorientation, they now possess a gaze that penetrates veils and a heart that no longer flinches at darkness. They are no longer triggered by the storm. They are the eye of it. To those still asleep, their presence may feel threatening, not because they are unkind, but because they reflect a level of clarity that exposes the fog others live in. And yet, to the wounded, to the seekers, to the ones on the edge of awakening, they feel like sanctuary. They radiate a frequency that dissolves masks and invites truth. This is not charisma, it's coherence. Not popularity, but presence. And this presence is both balm and sword. It comforts those who are ready to heal, and cuts through the noise of ego for those who are ready to see. In everyday life, they may appear as the friend whose silence makes you confront yourself, the colleague whose insight shifts an entire conversation, or the stranger whose eyes remind you of something ancient and sacred. They are no longer interested in being liked. They are committed to being real. This transformation is not performative. The healed empath doesn't announce their evolution, they embody it. Their boundaries are rooted not in fear, but in discernment. They have learned that not every invitation deserves a yes, and not every cry for help is theirs to answer. They serve without martyrdom. They love without losing themselves. Their life becomes a ritual of energy protection, spiritual hygiene, and soulful alignment. They no longer chase connections. They attract resonance. And in doing so, they become initiators. Without preaching, they teach. Without fixing, they transform. Without noise, they lead. The oracle archetype is not about predictions, it is about perception, seeing clearly, speaking truthfully, holding space for what others deny. They no longer apologize for their intuition, their solitude, or their silence. In fact, these become their superpowers. They no longer dwell in the trauma of who hurt them, but in the clarity of who they've become. They are not angry, they are awake. Not bitter, they are discerning. Their spirituality isn't aesthetics or trend. It's an awakened nervous system, a refined intuition, a frequency that no longer bends to please. They move through the world like sacred disruptors, their energy unsettling illusions, and their presence activating remembrance in others. And though they carry the wisdom of pain, they are not defined by it. they are now defined by choice. A conscious, embodied choice to no longer dim their light, shrink their spirit, or betray their knowing. They are the oracle born not to echo others, but to illuminate what others fear to see. 5. Awakening is not naivety. It's mature, grounded compassion. After surviving the psychological storm of a narcissist's darkness, the empath does not simply walk away. As the same person who entered that emotional labyrinth, they emerge transformed, not as a victim, but as a spiritual warrior whose scars have become symbols of sovereignty. They do not become bitter, but they do become clear. No longer is their empathy a reflex born out of emotional codependency or unconscious conditioning. It evolves into a spiritual force guided by discernment, purpose, and self-honor. This is the rebirth of a heart that has learned, sometimes through betrayal and heartbreak, that love without boundaries is self-abandonment in disguise. Once, the empath may have confused being needed with being valued, or assumed that to be spiritual meant to tolerate, to endure, or to fix the wounds of others at the expense of their own well-being. But now, their emotional generosity is not a default response. It is a conscious offering, no longer handed over to those who demand it, but extended with care to those who have earned it. They do not harden or retreat into apathy. Instead, they find the sacred ground where compassion and self-respect meet. They've come to understand that spirituality is not a passive state of blind acceptance, but a living intelligence that flows through their every yes and every no. This evolution is not loud, it is dignified. They begin to walk away from roles they never agreed to play, relationships that fed on their light, and dynamics that felt like emotional theft. In this awakening, they realize that protecting their peace is not selfish, it is sacred. They no longer absorb the chaos of others in an attempt to keep the peace, because now they know that true peace does not require self-erasure. Their energy, once poured out like a river with no shore, now flows with intention and rhythm. They stop apologizing for their intuition, for sensing too much, for loving deeply. Instead, they embrace these traits as their greatest assets, tools of insight, healing, and connection that no longer need to be diluted for others' comfort. As Carl Jung taught, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And the empath's journey after surviving narcissistic abuse is exactly that, a return to authenticity. They no longer seek to be understood by those who only ever wanted control, because they've realized that validation is an inside job. Their spiritual development no longer hinges on external harmony, but on internal alignment. And from this alignment, a new form of empathy arises, one that says, I see your pain, but I will not carry it for you. I feel your suffering, but I will not sacrifice my soul to soothe it. This is the rebirth of empowered sensitivity, where the empath no longer bleeds for those who refuse to heal, but instead holds space for their own joy, purpose, and peace. In this light, their kindness becomes fierce, their silence becomes sacred, and their presence becomes a mirror that reflects truth, not illusion. This is not the end of their empathy. It is its liberation. 6. The psyche's silence after the storm. After surviving the narcissist's darkness, what follows is not celebration, but a sacred and almost surreal silence. This silence isn't emptiness. It's the intelligent pause of your psyche, finally no longer in survival mode, beginning the profound process of reorganization. What's dissolving is not your strength, but the outdated identity that was once built around saving others. You were trained, perhaps unconsciously, to feel valuable by being needed, to feel seen by being self-sacrificing, to feel loved by abandoning yourself. But now, in this stillness, that performative self begins to fade, and what emerges is not another mask, but the essence of your authentic being. This is where Carl Jung's concept of the self begins to take shape, not as a personality or an adaptation, but as the archetype of wholeness that quietly orchestrates healing from the depths of the unconscious. You no longer chase meaning through chaos. Instead, you begin to see meaning in symbols, in dreams, in the quiet pull towards solitude. You find that spiritual intelligence is not about knowing everything, but about trusting the unknown inside you. This reawakening is not loud because it doesn't need to be. Spiritual wisdom doesn't scream, it resonates. And in this sacred inner space, you begin to realize that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about reclaiming what was buried. Your intuition sharpens. Your nervous system calms. You stop needing to explain your worth. The empath who has survived narcissistic manipulation is no longer driven by guilt or fear. They become sovereign. And that sovereignty is not arrogance, it's clarity. You start living from the inside out rather than outside in. You stop looking for mirrors in broken people and begin becoming your own reflection. Jung reminds us, who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. This awakening means no longer identifying with pain as personality, no longer chasing chaos as connection. You recognize that the role of savior was a disguise, a role you wore to survive dysfunction. Now, you are no longer a role, you are real. There's no need to perform empathy to earn belonging. You belong because you exist. The narcissist taught you the cost of abandoning yourself, but this silence teaches you the power of returning home to your soul. And in that return, you become someone entirely different, not harder, but wiser, not colder, but clearer. You become someone who doesn't just feel deeply, but sees clearly. Someone who doesn't rescue to feel useful, but listens to their inner self to stay truthful. You become a guide not because you've read spiritual books, but because you've lived through spiritual death. And now, your presence becomes intelligence. Your silence becomes authority. Your detachment becomes discernment. You are no longer who they broke, you are who you built. And that version of you, that is the true empath, whole, awake, and finally, free. 7. Individuation means integration. Real healing is not simply about moving past the pain someone else inflicted. It is about finally turning inward and illuminating the shadows that have always lived inside you. Carl Jung reminds us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The empath, after surviving the deep manipulation and psychological entanglement of a narcissist, often believes that freedom lies in the mere act of leaving. But leaving is only the threshold. The true transformation begins when the empath no longer sees themselves as a passive victim, but as an active participant in their own spiritual awakening. The narcissist entered their life through a crack, an invisible hunger to be needed, to be the savior, to feel irreplaceable, and unless this is examined, understood, and lovingly dismantled, survival becomes another prison disguised as liberation. The empath must go beyond surviving the darkness of another to confront the very light they once believed was their own. Their need to be the healer, the fixer, the one who holds everyone together. It comes not only from compassion, but from an unhealed wound that once associated love with sacrifice. And so, the journey of individuation begins. Not the search for perfection, but the radical integration of every part of the self, especially the ones they had long disowned in order to be accepted. The empath's power is not in how much they can give, but in how deeply they can see themselves. Spirituality, in its most intelligent form, demands that the empath ask hard questions. What within me allowed this dynamic to unfold? Why did I ignore my intuition? What wound was I trying to soothe by being someone else's lifeline? In modern relationships, this shows up as overextending at work, accepting poor treatment in the name of love, or staying silent to keep the peace. But silence, when used to protect dysfunction, is betrayal of the self. True spiritual wisdom is found in the moment an empath stops rescuing others and begins rescuing the neglected parts of their own soul. The narcissist was not just a threat, they were a mirror. They reflected back the parts of the empath that still relied on external validation to feel worthy. The relationship was never about love, it was about awakening. And when that lesson is learned, the empath stops living in cycles of emotional martyrdom and begins living with conscious presence. They no longer give out of fear of rejection, but out of fullness. They no longer stay to be chosen, they choose themselves. Integration means the empath no longer splits themselves into light and dark, healer and wounded. They understand that to be whole is to hold both, and in doing so, they reclaim their spiritual authority. They move through life no longer seeking applause for their kindness, but embodying discernment as their shield and clarity as their sword. They trust their instincts, protect their peace, and walk away without guilt. The narcissist's darkness was never the final chapter. It was the test. And now, the empath who once broke themselves to be loved has become someone far more powerful. Someone who sees through illusion, who sets boundaries without rage, and who recognizes that real love never asks you to shrink. In this becoming, the empath is not harder, they are wiser. Not colder, but clearer. And that is the essence of intelligent spiritual awakening. 8. You become the living paradox, fierce and tender. You become the paradox the world never expected, fierce enough to say no with conviction, yet tender enough to hold space for someone else's pain without collapsing into it. You become the empath who has walked through fire not to escape it, but to understand its language. You become the wounded healer, not in theory, but in truth, because your healing comes not from forgetting what was done to you, but from remembering it with sacred clarity. You no longer wear your wounds as proof of your pain. You wear them as proof of your transformation. What once shattered you now sharpens you. Your intuition is no longer a quiet whisper easily dismissed. It is a voice refined by suffering, honed by survival, and now it speaks with authority. As Carl Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens." You looked within the chaos, within the projection, within the trauma, and what you found was not just survival, but spiritual development. The narcissist taught you what love is not, and in that brutal education, you uncovered what real, soul-rooted love must be boundaried, awake, and reciprocal. You learn to descend into another's chaos without absorbing it. You enter their darkness as a witness, not as a sacrifice. You rise into your own light without guilt, without apology, and without the need to shrink to make others comfortable. You become the mirror that cannot be distorted. The empath, who once dissolved into others, now becomes the one who reflects truth with precision. People can no longer manipulate you because you have become too fluent in the language of energy. You don't just see the surface, you sense the intention behind it, and no mask can fool you. Your light is no longer passive, it is surgical, cutting through illusion with calm precision. You don't chase love anymore. You don't overextend yourself trying to be understood. You no longer give explanations where your energy is not honored. Your spirituality is no longer a performance of peace. It is a fierce devotion to your own soul. You no longer betray yourself to be accepted. You speak up even if your voice trembles. You walk away even when your heart still aches. You rest without shame, and you choose solitude not because you fear people, but because you honor your energy. You become the phoenix not just for having risen, but for having died with dignity. You burned away the parts of yourself that were rooted in codependency, silence, and self-abandonment. And in those ashes, you planted something rare, discernment. Now, your love has boundaries. Your compassion has depth. Your kindness has intelligence. You become the oracle, the one who sees behind smiles, behind charm, behind words. You see what people try to hide, and you no longer shrink in the face of that knowing. You don't confront to punish, you confront to clarify. You speak truth, not to be right, but to be free. You carry your past not as weight, but as wisdom. You don't deny the darkness you've been through. You integrate it. You understand that to be truly spiritual is to be both grounded and elevated, both soft and unbreakable, both human and sacred. You are no longer seeking to be liked. You are seeking to be aligned. Your presence becomes medicine to those who are ready and a mirror to those who are not. And through it all, you remain tender, not weak, but tender. Because tenderness, when born of awakening, becomes one of the strongest forces on earth. This is not just healing. This is spiritual development in its most embodied form. 9. The final answer, you become the self. After surviving the darkness of a narcissist, you do not return to who you were. You become who you were always meant to be. You no longer carry the labels they projected, the expectations society imposed, or the illusions you once clung to for safety. What emerges is not a wounded version of your past self, but the awakened self, a soul fully aware of its own value, anchored in its own light. Carl Jung called this sacred emergence individuation the journey of becoming whole by integrating both shadow and truth. This transformation is not simply healing from abuse. It is a radical, spiritual awakening born from pain, betrayal, and disillusionment. You rise not in spite of what you've been through, but because of it. Every moment of gaslighting that tried to rewrite your reality only made your inner knowing stronger. Every silent scream you swallowed became the seed of a voice that now refuses to be silenced. Every time your empathy was twisted into obligation, you began to sense the difference between authentic connection and emotional manipulation. What once broke you open is now what makes you unbreakable. This is not just recovery, it is resurrection. You no longer define yourself by how well you please others. You define yourself by how deeply you honor your own energy. You no longer run on the fuel of external validation. You are guided by inner truth. The empath, who once gave endlessly without boundaries, has become the soul that listens first to their own intuition. The person who once questioned their worth now moves with spiritual intelligence, recognizing that their sensitivity was never the problem, but the portal. That deep ache you once carried wasn't your weakness, it was your calling. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely," and yet, that is what you've done. You've met your pain. You've sat in the ashes. You've stopped performing for love. And in doing so, you've accessed something most people never touch: the sacred clarity that comes from being stripped of illusion. You now see with spiritual wisdom. You now sense energy before words. You recognize projection, deflection, and seduction as patterns of the wounded, not reflections of your worth. You no longer chase what depletes you. You protect what nourishes you. And in this newfound alignment, you become magnetic to truth, to peace, to depth. The empath becomes a rare force, not soft in the way the world defines softness, but powerful in a way that threatens every manipulative system built on control. Your presence no longer serves others' egos. It awakens their soul. You speak not to be understood by the blind, but to call forth those who carry the same frequency. You love without losing yourself. You give without self-abandonment. You walk away without guilt. What the narcissist couldn't destroy became the foundation of your sovereignty. And now, in the quiet power of your being, you embody Carl Jung's wisdom. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. You have chosen wholeness. You have chosen the truth. You have chosen to be the self. And that choice, made through fire, silence, and self-respect, is the most intelligent act of spiritual evolution there is. And so, as the empath rises from the ashes of narcissistic pain, they are no longer just a survivor. They are reborn as a force of clarity, compassion, and power. Their boundaries are sacred. Their intuition is sharp, and their soul has remembered who it truly is. If this message spoke to your journey, let it echo within you and remind you, you are not broken, you are becoming. If you found wisdom in today's video, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Tap the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next on your path of healing, awakening, and personal truth.